Greetings, my dear viewer. You're on the channel The Price of Cheating. The channel is for those who appreciate traditional family values and condemn adultery. So be sure to subscribe to the channel. Let's get started. The doorbell's ring jolted me from my focus on the TV. I stood up instinctively, peering through the peephole, feeling my stomach clench at the sight of her standing there. How did she even find me? Part of me wanted to turn away, pretend I hadn't noticed. But I knew she wouldn't leave until she'd said whatever it was she'd come to say. Leaving the security chain in place, I cracked the door open just enough for us to lock eyes. "What are you here for?" I asked. "I need to talk to you." I let out a hollow laugh. Wasn't my disappearing enough of a message that I don't want to see you? That I don't want to talk? She hesitated, as if choosing her words carefully. "You left without any explanation. No note, no reason, just empty spaces where your things used to be." I rolled my eyes. "Are you honestly telling me you don't know why?" She looked down, fidgeting. "I truly don't. If you ever explained, I guess I never understood." Her eyes lifted again, almost pleading. "Can I come in?" Realizing it might be best to get closure, I unlocked the chain and stepped aside. She came in, settling onto the couch and glancing around as if the place were unfamiliar. She asked for a glass of water. As I moved into the kitchen, memories surged back, the night it all unraveled. I'd come home from work to find Rebecca dressed to the nines, as if we had plans. "Are we going somewhere?" I asked, surprised. "No," she replied, brushing her hair back. "I have a date." "A date? With who?" My shock must have been written across my face. "Just a guy from work. You don't know him." "A guy from work?" I pressed, struggling to contain my anger. "Does he even know you're married?" "That doesn't matter. It's nothing serious. I didn't want to go to Scarlett's birthday by myself." The comment cut deep. "So because I won't go, you decided he'd be the next best option?" "You know why I don't want to go," I said, voice steady but tight. "I can't stand Scarlett, and I don't like you hanging around her either." "Get over it, Henry. She's my best friend. She's been there since I was a kid. I'm not about to cut her off just because you don't like her." "It's not about just liking her or not, Rebecca. She's been divorced 4 times, always over cheating. And those parties? They're filled with people high out of their minds. And now, because of her, you're prioritizing this date over us?" She bristled. "Are you saying you don't trust me just because of Scarlett's choices?" "Think about it," I replied, gesturing at her attire. "Look at yourself. You dressed up to impress this friend from work, didn't you?" She shook her head, exasperated. "How could you think that?" "I'm just saying what's obvious. Last time you went to Scarlett's, it was jeans and a sweater. Tonight, you're in a little black dress, like you're trying to be noticed. Scarlett's lifestyle is rubbing off on you and you're starting to give in." "You don't know what you're talking about." "Then prove me wrong," I challenged. "Stay here. Don't go." "I can't. Greg's expecting me." At that, something in me broke. "If you walk out tonight, you're walking away from this marriage." She sighed, exasperated. "This is ridiculous. Going out with a friend won't change anything." "Goodbye, Rebecca," I said, my voice cold and final. For a moment she hesitated, as if second-guessing her decision, but then she turned and left. My gut told me I was right. I knew the kind of scenes that played out at Scarlett's parties, and even if Rebecca hadn't indulged, she'd seen enough to be tempted. Scarlett had been pulling her into that lifestyle for years, murmuring, "Come on, Rebecca, he'll never find out." Rebecca would laugh it off, but her laugh sometimes felt hollow, as if part of her was considering it. I tried to pull her away from Scarlett's influence more times than I could count, but breaking that bond was like trying to snap an unbreakable chain bound to her since childhood. That night, as I lay in bed, my mind raced through conflicting paths, none clear or satisfying. Divorce loomed as one possible escape, but without undeniable proof of betrayal, my thoughts kept circling. Could I learn to accept her coldness? 7 years, mostly good, lay behind us, but always with Scarlett's influence casting a shadow. Maybe you wonder why I hadn't already confronted Rebecca. I needed to know if she'd truly crossed that line. Confronting her outright could push her to be more discreet, leaving me with even less clarity. But if she slipped up at Scarlett's, I had people who would let me know. With no answers, I drifted into restless sleep until the shrill ring of the phone startled me awake. I squinted at the clock. 1:07 a.m. A knot twisted in my stomach as I reached for the receiver. Hello? Hey, idiot, did I wake you? Scarlett's voice, sharp as ever, came through the line. What do you want, Scarlett? I muttered. Just thought you'd want a heads up. Your wife's found herself a real man now. What are you saying? I asked, though my stomach had already dropped. Exactly what it sounds like, she sneered. Rebecca's finally with someone who knows what she needs. Here, listen. I froze as muted but unmistakable sounds crackled over the line. Then, clear as day, I heard her voice whisper, Yes, please, harder. I slammed the phone down, but it immediately rang again. Shaken, I let it fall to the floor, unable to bear hearing any more dot. Within an hour, I'd packed essentials, loaded up my truck, and checked into a nearby motel. The straightforwardness of apartment living felt like a blessing. At dawn, I was at the bank as soon as it opened, emptying our joint accounts. Afterward, I went to work, explained the situation to my boss, and quit. He didn't ask questions, just handed me my final paycheck and helped me gather my things. By 7 a.m., my phone was buzzing relentlessly with calls from Rebecca. I finally shut it off, deciding a new number was necessary. But as a final measure, I tossed the phone into a dumpster and picked up a cheap prepaid one. Thankfully, our finances were mostly independent, so I didn't have to worry about her accessing my accounts. By 10 a.m., I was on the road, no destination in mind. I eventually settled down in a distant town, finding steady work and starting over. 2 years passed quietly, with a handful of casual dates. Life was regaining a sense of normalcy, until one day Rebecca showed up at my door. How did you even find me? I demanded. A very costly private investigator, she replied. Why would you go that far? Because we're married. I meant it when I took those vows. For better or worse. Where did you get the money for that? I sold the house, she answered. What house? I asked, caught off guard. The one the court awarded to me, she said simply. I was about to ask about the court proceedings, but it felt irrelevant now. You've wasted your time and money, I said. We're over. You did exactly what I told you would end this marriage when you went to that party. Don't even try to deny it. Scarlett called me in the dead of night and let me hear everything. Your yes, please, harder, was loud and clear. Henry, just let me explain. I didn't go there intending to cheat. It wasn't even a thought. Maybe I dressed up a bit, but that was because Scarlett asked me. She said Greg would leave if he didn't think he had a chance, and she didn't want him around. You expect me to believe that? Please, just listen. Greg got the wrong idea. He wouldn't leave my side, barely letting me talk to anyone else all night. At the gathering, I spent some time dancing with a few men, and that was all. As the night wore on, I began to feel faint and disoriented. Scarlett assumed I might have overindulged and suggested I lie down in one of her guest rooms. I'm unsure exactly when, but at some point I became aware of someone touching me in a way that was far too familiar. For a moment I thought I was at home with you, until an unfamiliar voice whispered, Hurry it up, I'm next. When I opened my eyes, I saw Scarlett there, along with Greg and Mark. A few other men, undressed, were nearby, one waiting his turn. Henry, you know me. You know how deeply I lose myself with you, how completely I surrender to the moment. I don't know how many people were there before everything went black. The next morning, I woke to find Michael beside me, staring at me with an unsettling intensity. Confused, I asked, What's going on? He smirked and said, I never thought you'd cheat on Henry, but I'm glad you did. I'd love to see you again. Horrified, I slapped him, dressed as fast as I could, and went straight to the hospital. At the hospital, I told the staff I suspected I'd been drugged. They tested me and found traces of Rohypnol and ecstasy, which led them to call the police. While waiting for them, I tried reaching you, but there was no answer. Later, I understood why when I returned home to find you gone. When the police arrived to question me, I shared what I could remember from that night. Admittedly, not much. Their first step was questioning Michael, who denied any knowledge of my drugging. He claimed such events were typical at Scarlett's parties, assuming I was fully aware. He even suggested he'd thought I had finally chosen to participate. The police then turned to Greg, who, under pressure, implicated Scarlett, saying she was behind the entire setup. Greg said Scarlett believed I secretly wanted to be part of the experience but needed a push. She thought that once the drugs wore off, I'd enjoy it enough to want it again. In a twisted way, she wasn't entirely wrong. There were moments when I felt pleasure. But she ignored the fact that I'd told her over and over that I wouldn't engage in any of this without you by my side. After leaving the hospital and the police station, an officer gave me a ride home. That was when it hit me why I hadn't been able to reach you. I broke down, and for days I could do little but cry. Eventually, I hired a lawyer and filed lawsuits against everyone involved that night. Most cases were dismissed, with everyone echoing Michael's account. However, Scarlett and Greg's roles were undeniable since they'd knowingly orchestrated the entire thing. I won those lawsuits, but Scarlett's assets were minimal, just her house, burdened with $25,000 in debt. I used the settlement from Greg to cover her remaining mortgage and sold her property. With the money from the sale, I hired a private investigator, and that's why I'm here now. You spent time and resources on a PI, just to attempt reconciliation? I want to be with you, Henry. I love you. I belong with you. You would have been better off using that money on a divorce lawyer. You could have filed for abandonment. I don't want a divorce, Henry. What you want is irrelevant to me now, Rebecca. I didn't choose any of this, Henry, but you chose to leave after I'd warned you that leaving would mean the end of our marriage. My departure should have shown you that I meant it. I'm here now to prove that to you. But you're still not listening, Rebecca. I don't want you here. There's no convincing me to come back, because I can't go back to someone capable of what you did. For God's sake, Henry, don't you understand I wasn't in control? I was drugged. You're the one not understanding, Rebecca. This isn't just about what happened at Scarlett's, though I did warn you about that risk. It's about the complete lack of respect you showed before even stepping out that night. Don't be ridiculous, Henry. None of this will change a thing for us. Those were your exact words as you left to meet someone else. In that moment, whatever hope I had for us vanished. Now please, go. I need to prepare for dinner. I'm famished. I'll come to dinner with you, and we'll talk it over. I'm going to show you that you're wrong and that we can work this out. Her voice barely faded before the front door swung open, and an undeniably attractive blonde stepped in, calling out, "Hey, babe, what's for dinner?" She spotted Rebecca and raised an eyebrow. "And who's she?" "This is Rebecca," I answered calmly. "I've mentioned her before." Rebecca's eyes went wide as the blonde moved closer, giving her a warm hug. "Thanks for sending Henry my way," she said, then turned to me with a smile. "What's the plan for dinner?" "I thought we'd eat out. I made a reservation at Carrabba's. Just give me a minute to change." She nodded, smiling at Rebecca. "Nice to meet you, Rebecca. Maybe we'll get together sometime and exchange stories." With that, she headed to the bedroom. "Rebecca, it's time for you to go. I need to get ready." "Does she know you're still married?" Rebecca pressed. "She does," I replied, matter of fact. "Then make sure she knows I'm not giving up on us, Henry. I'm going to fight for this." "Be realistic, Rebecca. To fight for me, you'd actually need to spend time with me, and we both know that's not happening. Get a divorce, find someone else, and when you do, don't treat him like you treated me." Tears filled her eyes as she whispered, "For God's sake, Henry, why can't you see? I didn't betray you. I was drugged." "That doesn't change anything, Rebecca. You had to be there to be drugged. I warned you. Leaving that night would be the end of us. You chose to walk out, and with that, you ended our marriage. It's as simple as that. Now please leave." "I won't agree to a divorce, Henry. You'll have to tell your girlfriend that. She'll never marry you." "She doesn't need to," I said flatly. "She's married just like I am. Her husband won't agree to a divorce, and she won't pay for one. I'm telling you, Rebecca, just let go." "I'll leave," she said quietly. "But I won't go far. I'll move here if I have to. I'm not giving up on us." "No, Rebecca, I've been clear enough. I don't want you back. Now go." She stifled her tears, turned, and walked away. Moments later, Luna reappeared, looking as stunning as ever. Still not ready? Changed your mind? No, I replied with a smile. It just took longer than I thought to send her away. Is she gone for good? Luna asked. She should be. I made it clear I'm done. Good, she replied, smiling. Because I don't plan on letting you go. I smiled back. Give me 10 minutes and I'll be ready. This concludes the story. If you like it, then put your powerful like and subscribe to the channel. Greetings, my dear viewer. You're on the channel The Price of Cheating. The channel is for those who appreciate traditional family values and condemn adultery. So be sure to subscribe to the channel. Let's get started. Victoria and I had been married for 8 years. Years that were steady, filled with comfort, and marked by a rhythm we'd both come to rely on. We had 2 children, and while we dealt with the usual ups and downs that come with marriage and parenthood, I had always felt secure in our relationship. Then last Saturday changed things. Victoria's friend Madison had invited us to a party. I didn't know Madison very well, but Victoria seemed genuinely eager to go. "It'll be fun," she'd said with enthusiasm, reminding me that since the kids were staying with my mom for the weekend, there was really no reason not to go. "Come on," she urged, her eyes bright. "It'll be nice to step out of our usual routine for once. Everyone's going to be there." I agreed, thinking that a bit of variety might actually do us some good. Looking back, though, I wish I'd had a better idea of what different would really mean. The party was packed, with laughter filling the air, music pulsing, and drinks clinking. Initially, everything seemed like a regular gathering, but as the evening went on, I started noticing subtle things: glances that lingered, hands that touched a beat too long, and a man I didn't know smiling at Victoria in a way that felt overly familiar. She returned his smile, and something deep in my gut tightened. "Hey, Grayson," Victoria teased, nudging me playfully. "You look so serious. Here, have a drink." She handed me a cocktail, and I took a sip, finding it stronger than I expected. Determined to shake off my unease, I tried to relax, brushing off the strange tension in the air. Then came the announcement. Madison's husband, Joe, gathered everyone into the living room, holding a big glass bowl. "All right, everyone," he called out with a grin. "Time for the raffle." The crowd cheered, and Victoria's face lit up with excitement. Puzzled, I leaned over and whispered, "What's this raffle all about?" But before she could answer, Joe spoke again. "Ladies, drop your keys in the bowl. Guys, you'll pick a set of keys at random, and you'll spend the night with whoever owns them. No strings attached." As the words sank in, the energy in the room shifted. People murmured in anticipation, and suddenly I realized what this really was: a swingers party. Stunned, I turned to Victoria. I had never been so blindsided. I grabbed her arm and led her quickly into the kitchen. "Did you know about this?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. She looked back at me without the slightest hint of remorse, her lips barely curving into a faint smile. "Yes," she admitted, her tone calm. I felt my heart drop. "And you didn't think to tell me?" She shrugged slightly. "I knew you'd react like this, that you wouldn't be open to it, so I didn't mention it. It's just one night, Grayson, a night of fun. People do this all the time. They say it's healthy for relationships." I felt like the ground was disappearing beneath my feet. "Victoria, I thought we were coming to a normal party, not whatever this is." She sighed, rolling her eyes a little. "It's just one night. We're already here, so why not give it a try? You're making a bigger deal out of it than necessary." She went on, "Both of us get to have a new experience, just for tonight. It doesn't mean anything." Doesn't mean anything? I almost laughed at how surreal it sounded. You honestly believe that sleeping with other people doesn't mean anything? Since when has that ever been an option in our marriage? Get your purse. We're leaving. Her expression hardened, and she crossed her arms. "Grayson, listen. I'm tired of everything feeling the same. Sometimes I feel invisible, like I'm only a mom and a wife. I need this. I need to feel noticed, to feel wanted. Is that truly what you're looking for? Another man to make you feel seen, desired? I asked, struggling to steady my voice. What about me? Isn't that supposed to be my place? Her gaze drifted to the floor, her response soft but unwavering. It's just for tonight. I'm not searching for love. This isn't about feelings, she said. Her words landed hard, and I took a step back, absorbing their weight. And you expect me to simply go along with this? She looked back at me, her expression unflinching. You don't get it, Grayson. This has nothing to do with love. It's just one night, something to revive us, to bring some novelty to our marriage. Disbelief and fury surged within me. We're leaving now, I said, anger seeping into my tone. I took hold of her arm, guiding her firmly toward the living room. Around us, others waited eagerly by the bowl, ready to draw keys and change partners for the evening, their eyes gleaming with anticipation. Victoria tried to pull away, but I kept my hold steady. Turning to face the room, I raised my voice, my frustration clear. No one mentioned what kind of party this was, I declared, my gaze sweeping over the group. I'm not sharing my wife with anyone. Not tonight, not ever. This is absurd. I reached into the bowl, grabbing a key with a red keychain, holding it up as if to make a final statement. This marriage is sacred. I won't tolerate this, not for an instant. A few people murmured, but I ignored them entirely. Victoria's face flushed, a mix of anger and embarrassment playing across her features. I turned to her, issuing an ultimatum. You decide, Victoria. Leave with me now and put all this behind, or stay here and don't expect me to wait around. I'm leaving. The room went silent, every eye fixed on her as she took a slow, tense breath. At last, she spoke, her voice taut with irritation. I apologize for my husband's reaction, she said to the group, her gaze lingering on them. I'd like to stay, but I suppose it's best if I go. Reluctantly, she followed me out to the car. As soon as we were inside, she turned to me with barely contained fury. You're unbelievable! Do you even realize how humiliating that was? We'll never be invited to anything like that again. Humiliate you? I retorted, struggling to keep my voice steady. What about how you humiliated me? Not even telling me that you intended to spend tonight with another man. You could have chosen a woman instead, and we both could have found something to enjoy. I don't want another woman, Grayson. I've been faithful to you. After 8 years together, you're asking for this? Disgust boiled within me, and I had to fight to keep my voice calm. It was a single night, Grayson. Just one time, after all we've shared. Is it really too much to ask? Yes, it is too much, I replied, my grip tightening on the steering wheel. This isn't some trivial thing, Victoria. This matters. I pulled the car over sharply, breathing hard. But if this really means that much to you, then fine. Without another word, I made a sharp U-turn, heading back toward Madison's house. She gasped as the car swerved. What are you doing, Grayson? If being with another man is what you need, then go. I pressed harder on the accelerator, the tires screeching as we sped down the road. There's still time for your little thrill. Her face went pale. What are you saying? I'm saying, if this is what you need, then go. Find someone who can give you what I apparently can't. It's just an adventure, Grayson. Something different. You're everything I need, but I want this. Then I don't want any part of it, I replied, my voice icy with finality. I had been unwaveringly loyal to her, and nothing had ever made me question that, until now. But if you go through with this, we're done, I warned her. Victoria's hand hovered over the door handle, her gaze clouded with doubt. Will you still pick me up tomorrow morning? She asked, her voice tinged with hope. I met her eyes, unfazed. I'm sure whoever you're with tonight will be happy to drop you off, I replied. A flicker of resentment crossed her face. You make it sound so seedy, Grayson. This isn't like that, she murmured, though her voice wavered. "It's exactly like that, Victoria. You're about to spend the night with someone else." She turned away, exhaling slowly. "It's just one night. It doesn't mean anything," she said, almost dismissively. "One night is already too much," I replied, my tone unyielding. "If you go through with this, it's over." She looked at me like I was being melodramatic. "You're blowing this out of proportion, Grayson. By tomorrow I'll be back with you, and none of this will matter." "No, Victoria. If you walk through that door, I won't want you back," I told her. She gave a careless shrug, as if she didn't believe me. "You're being ridiculous, Grayson. We're married. We'll figure this out." I shook my head, my voice as frigid as my resolve. "If you go in, we're finished." She hesitated for a brief moment, her hand still gripping the handle, before she opened the door with a defiant smile. "See you in the morning, Grayson," she said. "No, you won't," I whispered as I drove away, leaving her standing alone in the driveway, watching me go. I wanted her to call, to realize her mistake, to plead for me to come back. But the phone remained silent. As I drove, a wave of anger and betrayal surged through me. She'd chosen to throw away everything we had for a night with a stranger. By the time I got home, I was too furious to think straight. I grabbed a bag and started shoving clothes into it, not even caring what I packed. That's when my phone buzzed. It was her. Reluctantly, I picked up. "Hey," she greeted me casually, as if nothing was wrong. "Just checking in. I ended up with someone. I think his name's Sebastian," she added, her tone indifferent. "We're heading upstairs." Her words hit me like a punch. "Are you actually calling to tell me this, Victoria?" I demanded. She sighed, as though I were the one being unreasonable. "Calm down, Grayson. By tomorrow, everything will be back to normal. Trust me, this will bring us closer." Fury surged through me, and I tossed the phone onto the table. She didn't seem to grasp how deeply she'd wounded me. Then I noticed the call was still active. Suddenly, I heard her voice, low and intimate, as she whispered, "Oh my God, that feels amazing." Her voice rose. "Harder, please." Rage burned through me, and I nearly smashed the phone. Instead, I hit record, realizing I'd need proof of this night. The night she chose to break us. She had no idea I was listening, and I doubted she'd care if she knew. I stormed into our bedroom, yanking clothes and essentials from the closet and throwing them into my suitcase. When I'd loaded everything into the car, I went back inside one last time. I stopped in front of our wedding photo, staring at the happiness in our smiles. I tore the photo out of the frame and tossed it aside, then picked up our marriage certificate and ripped it in two, letting the pieces fall to the floor. I couldn't bear to keep anything that reminded me of what I thought we had, of the lie I'd been holding on to for too long. With my belongings gathered and my heart in pieces, I walked out of the home we'd shared. I drove directly to a hotel, craving solitude, somewhere far from the life I knew, where I could clear my head and regroup. I realized I needed to plan my next steps, though a part of me already knew that forgiving her was out of the question. That night, I lay awake, haunted by restless thoughts. When I couldn't take it anymore, I called my friend Josh. He agreed to meet me at a nearby bar. As I recounted everything, Josh listened closely, his expression grave, a steady hand on my shoulder. "Look, you don't have to take this lying down," he said firmly. "I have a cousin who's a lawyer, and he can help. We'll make sure your assets are safe. You'll only be on the hook for child support, not half of everything you've worked for." The weight of it all hit me hard. "But what about the kids?" I asked, fear and sadness woven into my voice. Josh let out a long breath, thinking it through. "It's tough, but maybe the evidence you have could tip things in your favor in court." We went over everything, planning it out carefully before I returned to the hotel, still tangled in my thoughts. The next morning, Victoria called. After a pause, I knew I couldn't keep avoiding her, so I picked up. "What is it, Victoria?" I asked, my voice as cold as I could make it. She sighed, her voice trembling. "What do you think I want, Grayson?" "I want you to come back home," she pleaded. I took a steadying breath, my tone remaining distant. "After what you did, that's not happening," I replied flatly. "Don't say that, Grayson. Please don't. It was only one night, all right? 4 times, and once today. I needed it, and you don't understand." Her words were raw, almost frantic. "Victoria, what you've done can't just be undone. This wasn't a small error. You crossed a line," I said, barely keeping my voice steady. "But I love you, Grayson," she whispered. "It wasn't about you. It was something I needed," she tried to explain. "That's exactly the problem, Victoria," I replied bitterly. "You only thought about yourself, not about me or our kids." I braced myself, knowing the gravity of what I was about to say. "I've filed for divorce. You'll hear from my lawyer next week." She began sobbing, telling me she'd never meant to hurt me, insisting she didn't care about Sebastian, that she only wanted to feel desired. She claimed it was supposed to bring us closer, to somehow save us. "It's too far gone to be saved," I replied, my voice carrying the finality of the decision. "You made your choice, Victoria." The divorce became official after a grueling 6 months. In the end, the court granted her custody of the kids and awarded her the house, while I was left with weekend visits to watch my children's lives from the sidelines. It took me a long time to process it all, to feel the emptiness of missing my kids while knowing I could never reclaim our old life. Eventually, I threw myself into work, building a new life from scratch. Slowly, I started to heal. My weekends with the kids turned sacred, and I poured my whole heart into every visit, cherishing each moment. Over time, I realized that though I'd lost so much, I hadn't lost everything. I still had love, family, and the strength to start over. In that realization, I found a new sense of peace. This concludes the story. If you like it, then put your powerful like and subscribe to the channel. Greetings, my dear viewer. You're on the channel The Price of Cheating. The channel is for those who appreciate traditional family values and condemn adultery. So be sure to subscribe to the channel. Let's get started. They say the truth finds a way to reveal itself, no matter how much you try to bury it. Mila and I have been married for nearly 10 years, and until recently, I was convinced our bond was unbreakable. So when she mentioned a girls' trip to Miami, I didn't question it. She said she needed a break, a few nights away with friends to recharge and let loose. I trusted her completely because secrets had never been a part of our relationship. At least, that's what I believed. The first night I was home alone, flipping through TV channels, attempting to ignore the empty silence that filled the house. I kept glancing at my phone, waiting for a message to confirm that Mila had arrived safely. Around 9 p.m., it came. "Just checked in, babe. The hotel is beautiful. Wish you were here. Love you." I replied, "Love you too, babe. Have fun." It felt like any other night. Little did I know that this would be the last calm moment I'd experience for a while. Later that evening, my phone rang unexpectedly. It was Alexander, a friend from college I hadn't heard from in years. His tone was tense, almost secretive. "Daniel," he whispered, as though he didn't want anyone else to hear. "Yes, it's me," I responded, surprised. "Alexander, it's been forever. What's going on?" He paused, and I felt a chill. I'd never heard him sound like this. "Daniel, I don't know how to say this," he began, his voice faltering. My heart was already racing. "What is it, Alexander? Is everything okay?" He drew a deep breath. "I saw Mila tonight, here in Miami," he said softly. "And she wasn't alone." I felt my blood run cold. What do you mean?" I asked, though I could feel what was coming. "She was with another guy. They were close, dancing together, touching. I'm sorry, Daniel, but I thought you should know." His words struck like a blow to the gut. Are you certain it was her?" I managed to ask, even though in my gut I already knew. "I'm sure, Daniel. I saw it with my own eyes," he replied, hesitating before adding, "Do you want me to follow her?" "Yes, The word came out before I could think. Please, let me know if anything else happens. And with that, we ended the call. That night, sleep was impossible. Every notification from my phone sent a jolt through me as I braced for a message from Alexander. By morning, I couldn't bear the waiting anymore. I booked the next available flight to Miami, threw some clothes into a bag, and left, without giving Mila any warning or explanation. I couldn't keep questioning, couldn't keep guessing. I needed to see the truth for myself, undeniable and unfiltered. If Mila wouldn't be honest with me, I'd have to uncover it alone. That afternoon, I arrived in Miami and met Alexander. We found a quiet, dimly lit cafe near the beach to talk. He looked as troubled as I felt. "I'm sorry, Daniel," he said as we sat down, "but I knew you'd want to know." I nodded, swallowing the growing ache in my throat. "Where did you see them?" After leaving the club, they headed to a bar on Ocean Drive. His face was tense, a mixture of anger and sorrow. "They were very close, Daniel. Way too close," he said quietly, his voice heavy with something that made my stomach twist. I forced myself to ask, "Did you actually see them kiss?" The question felt thick and bitter in my throat. Alexander looked down, and when he finally met my eyes, his face was a mask of sympathy edged with anger. He nodded slowly. "Yes, I did. This wasn't some accidental touch," he continued, his voice raw. "They were wrapped up in each other like no one else mattered. They didn't even notice me standing there." His words struck me hard, but I could see he wasn't finished. He hesitated, reluctant to deliver the final blow, but he knew I needed to hear it. "Afterward, they left together," he said, his reluctance clear. The words hit me like a punch. The image of Mila, someone I thought I knew deeply, pulling another man toward her hotel room made my blood boil. I clenched my fists, trying to keep my anger in check. "Did they go to her room?" I asked, barely holding my voice steady. Alexander nodded, the disbelief in his eyes mirroring my own. I followed just far enough to see them enter. The door closed, and that was that. Rage bubbled up inside me, leaving me shaking. Alexander placed a hand on my shoulder in silent support. "I just don't understand," I muttered, my voice thick with frustration. "Why would she do this?" Alexander shook his head, as lost as I was. "Only she knows, Daniel," he said. We agreed to watch and see if she'd meet up with him again. Sure enough, by 8 p.m., there she was, sitting with her friends at a restaurant, and him. They sat at an outdoor table, laughing. She leaned closer, her hand brushing his, and then she kissed him. My body reacted before my mind could catch up, but Alexander grabbed my arm, pulling me back. "Daniel, wait! Are you sure you want to do this now?" But I couldn't hold back. I marched over to the table. Mila's face went pale, her expression like she'd just seen a ghost. "Daniel," she managed, her voice barely a whisper. What are you doing here?" I couldn't hide the sarcasm that laced my words. "Oh, just thought I'd come by and catch my wife cuddling up with someone else, right here in Miami." Her friends were frozen in shock, and the man across from her muttered something before standing and slinking away. "Pathetic," I spat. Mila looked at me, her voice trembling. "Daniel, please, I'm so sorry. I don't even know what I was thinking." "Oh, you don't know?" I shot back, my voice rising with fury. "You flew here just to betray me, and you have no idea what you were thinking?" People around us started watching, but I didn't care. The betrayal boiled within me, uncontainable. "Please, Daniel," she whispered, her hands reaching out, desperation etched in her face. "Let's go somewhere and talk. I can't lose you. I don't want to." I let out a bitter laugh. "Talk?" I said, my voice dripping with sarcasm. "You weren't interested in talking when you threw everything away, were you?" Tears streamed down her face as she covered it with her hands, her voice breaking. "I'm sorry. Please, just let's go somewhere, just us, and talk it through. I'm begging you." I shook my head, unable to listen, unwilling to forgive. "It's done, Mila," I declared, my voice firm. "Tomorrow I'm calling a lawyer." 9 years of marriage, unraveling in a single moment. As I turned to go, I felt a hand grasp my arm. "Daniel, wait," a gentle voice pleaded. It was one of Mila's friends, Arya, if I remembered correctly. Her expression was a mix of empathy and urgency as she looked at me. "It doesn't have to end like this," she murmured. "Talk to her." Arya had always been kind, maybe even a bit too attentive, but this time was different. It was as though she genuinely understood the turmoil I felt. "There's nothing left to say," I replied, shaking my head. "Mila's already made her choice." Arya hesitated, offering a soft, uncertain smile. "You deserve better, Daniel," she said quietly, her hand giving mine a gentle squeeze before releasing me. I glanced back at Mila one last time. She was crying, surrounded by her friends, but I felt nothing, no sympathy, no remorse, not after what she'd done. The next morning, I made the call to my lawyer, initiating the divorce. I decided to linger in Miami for a few days, partly to clear my mind, partly to get a fresh start before returning home. Later that afternoon, Arya messaged me, suggesting we meet up. She thought I could use some company. We met at a beachside bar, and for the first time in days, I felt a sense of calm, a chance to breathe freely again. Over drinks, we began talking about everything. Arya confided in me that she, too, had gone through a painful divorce. Her husband had betrayed her with his secretary. She admitted that while she had always been close with Mila, she'd often seen me as the one holding our relationship together. "Honestly, I always felt you deserved more," she said, swirling her drink thoughtfully. "The way you looked at her, like she was your whole world." I sighed, my gaze drifting to the ocean. "I just don't understand why she did it. I wish I could." Arya placed her hand gently over mine. "If you ever need to talk, I'm here. You're the kind of man who deserves someone who truly values what you bring to a relationship," she said softly, meeting my gaze. For a moment, we simply looked at each other, and I realized how close we'd become. Arya was so unlike Mila, confident, resilient, with a spark I hadn't felt in a long time. One thing led to another, and by the end of the night, we ended up in my hotel room. For the first time, I felt a release from the anger and betrayal I'd been carrying. But then, later that night, Mila appeared at my hotel. She looked shattered, eyes swollen, her voice hoarse with desperation. "Daniel, please," she whispered. "Don't do this. I made a terrible mistake, but I love you. I can't lose you." I shook my head slowly. "You should have thought about that before destroying everything we had." She began to cry harder, burying her face in her hands. "I don't know what I was thinking," she stammered. "I was drunk. It meant nothing." "It doesn't change anything, Mila," I replied coldly. "You made your choice. Now I've made mine." At that moment, Arya stepped out from the bathroom, wearing one of my shirts that barely reached her thighs. She stood there, her gaze steady on Mila, with a mix of pity and quiet determination. Mila's face fell, her shock evident as she took in the scene. Mila's eyes darted between us, her face shifting as the realization took hold. "Daniel, are you two involved?" Her voice trembled with disbelief. I didn't attempt to deny it. "Why does it even matter, Mila? We ended things. Remember?" Her face contorted, the sorrow morphing into rage. "You've known her forever. She was my friend, Daniel. How could you betray me like this?" I gave a harsh laugh. "Are you seriously accusing me after everything you put me through?" Arya stepped forward, her gaze steady. "Maybe it's time you admit the truth, Mila. You shattered his heart, and someone had to help him piece it back together." Mila's face twisted with anger, a strangled cry escaping her before she lunged at Arya, clutching her hair in a furious grip. "With my husband? You heartless traitor!" she screamed, her voice cracking with pain. "You were my friend! How could you do this to me?" Arya gasped, recoiling from the pain. But before Mila could do more, I stepped between them, grabbing her arm to hold her back. "That's enough," I said firmly, keeping her at arm's length. "Leave, Mila. I don't want to see you here again." Her anger faltered, leaving behind a look of fragile despair as her eyes filled with fresh tears. She staggered toward the door, her sobs filling the silence. With a final, wounded look in my direction, she left, slamming the door behind her. I felt no remorse. For the first time since Alexander's call, I felt a sense of release. 6 months later, our divorce was finalized. Arya stood by my side, and the irony wasn't lost on me. The very woman Mila had trusted was the one who had shown me what I'd been missing. Together, Arya and I moved to a new city, away from the ghosts of our past, and eventually, we married. The ceremony was small and personal, with only our closest friends and family, just the way I wanted. We began building a life together, and for the first time, I understood what genuine love and trust felt like. As for Mila, I hadn't spoken to her since the divorce was settled. I'd heard she started dating again, but her relationships didn't seem to last. She kept ending things, but honestly, it was no longer my concern. I had Arya, and that was all that mattered. This concludes the story. If you like it, then put your powerful like and subscribe to the channel.